We have reached week 3 of our 3-part series on Sabbath. We began by hearing Jesus call to each of us to come away and rest a while. We explored how engaging in Sabbath rest can begin to change our relationship to time, reminding us we are not indispensable. However, Sabbath rest doesn't just happen. Remember, it requires intentionality in the midst of a world committed to busyness. It also requires mindfulness, in particular, being mindful and aware of those things which can pull us away from Sabbath rest. Be they the errant pair of shoes on the staircase that need to be put away, emails from colleagues awaiting a response, an unmowed lawn, or the siren call of social media. So, as promised, today we will dive deeper into the nitty-gritty details of Sabbath rest. How do we start a Sabbath practice? Are there things we are permitted to do or that we can't do on Sabbath? How does this even work? Let me begin by saying there are myriad resources available on Sabbath from many, many different perspectives, from Orthodox Jewish to evangelical Christian and everything in between. If this topic has really piqued an interest in you, or if it's something you feel your soul craving, I encourage you to explore it more deeply from a variety of perspectives to help you find what works for you. Feel free to ask me. I'm happy to point you in direction of good resources from a variety of angles. There is one resource, however, that I would like to call attention to. I have found it particularly helpful in this season of life, and I would commend it to everyone. It is Sabbath in the Suburbs by Marianne McKibben Dana. It is accessible, it is down to earth, it is a fun and easy read. And it is available in the parish library. So you can check it out from there after the 10 o'clock service, because I need it for a visual aid. Today's tips come largely from this text. Let's dive in. Tip number 1, to begin a Sabbath practice, start by defining your boundaries. Defining your boundaries. As we discussed in week 2, Sabbath begins with intentionality, and intentionality necessitates boundaries. Boundaries, however, do not have to be brick walls, unbending, solid, eternal. They can be like the coastline, where the water meets the sand. Marianne describes this in her book as always present, but shifting, as the water and the sand move against one another, making adjustments as each needs or as the other requires. So our boundaries exist, but there can be movement in them. She offers a helpful list of questions to consider to help us get started defining these boundaries. A few of them are, how long will Sabbath be? A whole day, a half day, a few hours? Will Sabbath be on the same day each week? Judaism traditionally holds it on Saturday. We, in the Christian faith, traditionally have Sunday. Muslim faith is traditionally Friday. Maybe Tuesday works better for you, though. If it won't be on the same day every week, will it move? And if it's going to move, when when are you going to decide that needs to happen? How will Sabbath time begin? It is helpful to have a defining moment to say, here starts Sabbath. Traditionally, within the Jewish faith, this is the lighting of the Shabbat candles. It could also be the ringing of a bell. Perhaps a time of silence as you enter into Sabbath rest. But give yourself a moment to define the start. The same with the end. How will it end? How will you know Sabbath has come to a conclusion? Again, a ringing of a bell, perhaps the extinguishing of a candle, or another time of silence. And perhaps the most important and most challenging question: what is work? What will we be ceasing from? One suggestion that is offered in the book that I particularly liked is to choose to refrain from any activity that changes your environment. Refrain from any activity that changes your environment. For one day, we will allow things to be as they are, for better or for worse. And we will appreciate them for what they are in that moment, just as God did on the seventh day of creation. So we will choose to walk past the errant shoes on the staircase. We will enjoy the feeling of the tall, tall grass between our toes instead of pulling out the lawnmower. And we will leave the email for another day. Or, what if we never knew the email was there to begin with? One of the other great Sabbath questions to consider in our day and age is, what do we do with technology? Technology is a wondrous thing, but it can also leave us feeling overstimulated and exhausted. The ability of technology, particularly our smartphones and tablets, to draw us away from Sabbath rest and deeper into conflict and busyness of the mind is insidious. We don't even notice it's happened until we emerge from behind our screens feeling exhausted or anxious or simply spent. I would encourage you to give deep and serious consideration to practicing a screen-free Sabbath. No phone, no iPad, no Kindle, no computer, and perhaps even no TV. Allow your heart and mind space away from the constant influx of information so that you might simply be. This feels incredibly challenging, I know, in our world of constant information. What if something happens and I don't know? Well, what if something does happen and you don't know? If it's an emergency related to you, I guarantee you people will find you. If it's something in the world, would it hurt if you don't know till tomorrow? We've got some boundaries. We know what we aren't going to do, but now what are we going to do? We now have a period of time. What do we fill it with? Tip number 2. Let delight be your guide. Let delight be your guide. What delights you? Do you know? Can you name it? Sabbath is a space custom made for following our delight. Allow delight to be your guide and give yourself permission to do the things that bring you joy, or to experiment with something you think might bring you joy. Always wanted to try your hand at bread baking? Find a recipe and dig in. Love to read? Grab a book and immerse yourself in it. Feeling tired? Curl up on the couch and take a good nap. There is nothing more holy on Sabbath than a good nap. Sabbath is also an opportunity for those of us with children or grandchildren to explore what brings them delight. Encourage them to try their hand at activities that don't require a screen. A bike ride, a book, playing a card game. But also notice if they truly enjoyed that activity. Had they never played Go Fish before, and the tangible holding of the cards and flopping them down brought them joy? By helping them explore what brings them delight, we can help establish a pattern of Sabbath that will bring rest not only to the adults in the family, but also to our overstimulated and often overcommitted children. Following our delight also means asking another question. Is what I am doing still bringing me delight? Has what began as a time to play in your garden, to dig in the dirt and feel it under your nails, shifted away from delight and now become yard work? If the answer is yes, it's time to stop and follow your delight in a new direction. Which brings us to tip number 3. Explore being unintentional. Explore being unintentional. It can be easy to feel as though we need to fill Sabbath up with as many activities as a regular day. After all, we should be doing something, right? That's not what Sabbath is about, though. Remember, Sabbath in Hebrew means stop. Stop. So give yourself over to unintentionality. Trust the boundaries you have created and allow the day to take you where it will. You may be surprised where you end up. Amen.